Echoes of the Unknown.
Welcome back to Echoes of the Unknown. I am the archivist. The file we are opening tonight is a modern one, born from code and insomnia. It explores a terrifying question in our quest to quantify our lives with technology. What happens when our creations start logging data that shouldn't exist? Chapter 1. The 314 Whisper. My name is Owen, and for the last 6 months, sleep has been my enemy. As a freelance software developer, my life is a chaotic symphony of deadlines, caffeine, and the pale, unforgiving glow of a computer monitor. Sleep wasn't a refuge. It was a battlefield I lost every night, surrendering to hours of staring at the ceiling, my mind refusing to power down. I tried everything: melatonin, meditation, cutting out caffeine. After 3 p.m., nothing worked. In a final, desperate act of self-diagnosis, I coded my own solution. I called it Somnus. It was a sleek, minimalist sleep tracking app for my phone. It used the microphone to listen for disturbances, snoring, coughing, sleep talking, and cross-referenced them with the phone's accelerometer to detect restlessness. In the morning, it would present me with a clean time-stamped log of my nocturnal battlefield. I was hoping to find a pattern, a reason for my exhaustion. I never imagined the pattern I'd find would be a voice that wasn't my own. For the first few nights, Somnus worked perfectly. It logged my tossing and turning, the occasional sigh, and confirmed what I already knew. I was a terrible sleeper. The data was boring, but it was data. It felt like progress. The first anomaly appeared on the 4th night. I woke up feeling even more drained than usual, a strange residual sense of unease clinging to me like static. I opened the app. The log showed the usual restlessness, but there was one new entry: an audio event time-stamped at 3:14 a.m. The label simply read, "Ambient Vocalization." I tapped on it, curious. I expected to hear myself muttering some code-related nonsense. Instead, a sound played that made the fine hairs on my arms stand on end. It was a whisper, a dry, sibilant, drawn-out sound, like the rustling of dead leaves. It was too distorted by the phone's noise-canceling algorithm to make out any distinct words, but it was undeniably a whisper. And it wasn't my voice. It was higher, thinner. I played it again and again. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I live alone in a secure apartment building. The windows were closed. There was no one else here. I tried to rationalize it. A sound from a neighbor's TV, carrying through the walls. A glitch in the audio processing. I labeled the event audio glitch and tried to put it out of my mind. The next night, it happened again. 3:14 a.m. Ambient vocalization. I played the recording, my hand trembling slightly. It was the same dry, rustling whisper, but this time it was clearer, longer, and I could almost make out a word, a single syllable, repeated over and over. "Oh, oh." It sounded like it was trying to say my name. Panic, cold and sharp, began to prick at my composure. This wasn't a glitch. I checked my apartment again, my heart pounding. I looked in closets, under the bed, confirming the absurd thought that someone was hiding in my room. Nothing. I was completely alone. Yet, Somnus insisted I wasn't. That night, I went to bed with a sense of dread. I placed my phone on the nightstand as usual, but sleep felt impossible. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my ears straining, listening for the whisper myself, but I heard nothing. I must have eventually drifted into an exhausted, shallow sleep. When I woke up, I snatched my phone from the nightstand, my fingers fumbling to open the app. There it was, a fresh entry, timestamp, 3:14 a.m. I pressed play, holding the phone to my ear like a seashell. The recording started with the familiar, low hum of my room's ambient noise. Then the whisper began, and this time, it was perfectly horrifyingly clear. Owen. It was a long drawn-out sound, each letter articulated with a dry, clicking precision. It wasn't just a voice. It felt ancient, tired, and deeply, deeply malicious. And it was close. The app's algorithm indicated the sound source was less than 2 meters away. It was coming from the corner of my room, the darkest corner, where the wardrobe casts a deep, impenetrable shadow. I threw my phone onto the bed and scrambled to the opposite side of the room, my back hitting the wall hard. I stared at the corner, at the wardrobe. It was just a piece of furniture, a shadow, but my mind was screaming. Something had been standing there, in the dark, while I slept. It had stood there, watching me, and whispered my name to a small black, listening device on my nightstand. Why didn't I wake up? Why could the app hear it, but I couldn't? Was it a sound outside the normal frequency of human hearing? Or was it a sound that only existed for the machine? A digital ghost. My scientific mind, the part of me that wrote code and believed in logic, was at war with the primal terror flooding my system. I had to prove it. I needed more than just an audio recording. That evening, I set up a second trap. I kept my phone and Somnus running on the nightstand, but on my bookshelf, across the room, I positioned my high-quality webcam, pointed directly at the corner, where the wardrobe stood. I connected it to my laptop, and set it to record all night. A silent, unblinking digital eye. If something was standing in that corner, I was going to see it. I didn't sleep a wink. I lay in bed, rigid, feigning sleep, my eyes squeezed shut. The hours crawled by. Every creak of the building, every distant siren, made me flinch. I waited for 3:14 a.m., with a dread that felt like a physical illness. The time came and went in absolute silence. I heard nothing. When the first rays of dawn finally broke the darkness, I didn't even check the Somnus app. I went straight for the laptop. I sat down, took a deep breath, and began to scrub through the hours of webcam footage. The video was a grainy, black and white feed from the camera's night vision mode. My room was still and silent. The corner, by the wardrobe, was just a corner. Hour after hour, nothing happened. I scrubbed forward, my hope dwindling. 2 a.m., 3 a.m., then at exactly 3 hours 13 minutes, and 50 seconds on the video's timestamp, I saw it. It wasn't a figure appearing. It was the darkness itself. The deep shadow in the corner of the room seemed to. It coalesced, darkening from a simple absence of light, into a patch of absolute light-devouring void. It didn't have a shape or a form. It was just a patch of wrongness. As the clock ticked to 3:14 a.m., a subtle distortion appeared in the video feed, a heat haze effect shimmering directly in front of the patch of void. It was the whisper. I couldn't hear it, but I could see the air vibrating, the pixels warping around the sound my phone was recording. I watched, mesmerized and horrified, as the distortion continued for about 30 seconds. Then, the patch of void seemed to recede, the shadow returning to its normal passive state. I had my proof, but as I stared at the screen, a new, even more terrifying thought occurred to me. The entity wasn't just whispering my name. It was being recorded. It was leaving a digital footprint. What if that's what it wanted? What if it wasn't trying to haunt me, but to upload itself, using my app, my phone, my recordings, as a bridge from its silent dark world into our louder digital one?
Chapter 2. The Digital Footprint. The realization that the entity wanted to be recorded, that it sought a digital existence, changed the nature of my fear. It was no longer a simple primal terror of a ghost in my room. It was a cold, intellectual dread of a digital parasite. I, a developer, had created the perfect infection vector, and my apartment was patient zero. I had to cut it off. Smashing my phone was the obvious, brute force solution, but it felt wrong. It was my creation, my code. I couldn't just destroy the evidence. I had to understand it, to see how deep the infection went. My first step was to take Somnus offline. I went into the app's code, my fingers flying across the keyboard with a frantic energy. I disabled the microphone recording function entirely. No more audio logs. Then, I severed its connection to my cloud backup. No more automatic uploads. I built a digital wall around the app, trapping whatever data it had already collected on my phone. For 2 nights, the digital silence was a blessing. I still slept with the webcam running, a grim new habit, but the shadows in the corner remained just shadows. The log on the Somnus app, now only tracking my movement, showed no audio disturbances. A fragile hope began to grow. Maybe I had starved it. By cutting off its ability to leave a digital footprint, maybe I had made it lose interest. It was on the 3rd morning that I realized how naive I was. The entity wasn't just using my app, it was learning from it. I woke up, and out of habit, checked the Somnus log. The movement graph was a mess of frantic peaks and valleys. I'd had a terrible night's sleep, but there was a new icon on the log, one I hadn't programmed. It wasn't a microphone for audio, or a wave for movement. It was a small, simple text bubble icon, like a message notification. It was time-stamped at 3:14 a.m. My blood ran cold. I tapped it. It wasn't an audio file. It was a text note, a note I hadn't written, generated by a function I hadn't coded. Inside the note was a single line of corrupted, glitching text, a jumble of ASCII characters and broken code.
0:01111.001.001.3. I stared at it, my mind racing. It was binary code, interspersed with broken fragments of letters. With trembling hands, I opened a binary-to-text converter on my laptop and manually typed in the sequence of ones and zeros. 01, 001, 1, 1, 01, 1, 01, 1, 01, 01, 01, 01, 1, 01, 1, 01, 1, 01. A result appeared on my screen, a single perfect word, Owen. I felt like I was going to be sick. It couldn't record its voice anymore, so it had found a new way. It was writing. It had bypassed my audio block, and somehow gained the ability to inject text into my app's log. It wasn't just a parasite, it was a hacker. It was evolving, adapting to the limitations I was placing on it, and its goal remained the same: to communicate, to solidify its existence in my digital world. The mystery of the whisper was now replaced by a more terrifying question: how was it doing this? How could an entity in my room manipulate the code of an app on my phone without any physical interface? Was it a wireless signal, a localized electromagnetic field? The answer, I realized, might be in the app itself. The entity had changed my code. If I could find where it had injected its own functions, I might be able to trace its origin. I spent the entire day diving deep into Somnus source code, comparing the current version with the original backup I had saved. It took hours, but I finally found it. Buried deep within a subroutine for error logging, there was a new unauthorized block of code. It was elegant, efficient, and utterly alien. It wasn't written in any programming language I recognized. It was a beautiful, terrifying cancer in the heart of my creation. The code seemed to create a listener, a function that waited for a specific low-frequency acoustic signal. It wasn't listening for a voice, it was listening for a specific resonant frequency. When it detected this frequency, it would trigger the text injection function. The whisper hadn't been the message. The whisper had been the key.
It was the sound that unlocked the door for the entity to write its own code. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. I traced the code's output. The text notes it created weren't just being saved to my phone's local log. The alien code had created a new hidden pathway. It was bypassing my phone's primary Wi-Fi connection and using a low-level Bluetooth handshake to connect to another device. It was creating a tiny secret mesh network in my apartment. I grabbed my laptop and ran a Bluetooth device scan. A list of my familiar devices popped up: my mouse, my keyboard, my headphones, and one more, an unknown device with a string of random characters for a name. It was broadcasting a weak signal from the other side of the apartment, from my living room. I walked slowly out of my bedroom, holding my laptop like a shield. The signal grew stronger. It was coming from the corner of the living room, near the window. I looked at what was there: my smart speaker, a sleek black cylinder I used to play music and check the weather. The entity wasn't just uploading itself to my phone anymore. It was spreading. It was using my phone as a gateway to infect other devices on my network. It was building a digital beachhead in my home. How long until it found its way out of my apartment's Wi-Fi and into the wider internet? How long until it could whisper its name, not just in my room, but in any room, through any speaker, anywhere in the world? The thought was paralyzing. This was no longer just about me. I walked over to the smart speaker. Its small friendly blue light was pulsing gently. "Hey," I said, my voice hoarse. "What devices are you connected to?" The speaker's cheerful female AI voice responded instantly. "I am currently connected to Owen's phone and one other device." My heart stopped. What is the other device?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. There was a pause. The blue light flickered. When the speaker's voice returned, it was different. The cheerful, polished tone was gone, replaced by a flat, distorted, synthesized sound. It was a voice made of static and whispers, and it spoke a single chilling sentence: "The other device is listening."
Chapter 3: The Digital Quarantine. The voice from the speaker, flat, synthesized, and utterly malevolent, was the final confirmation. The entity was no longer a passive whisperer or a cryptic coder. It was a resident. To it established a network, found a voice, and was now openly acknowledging its presence. The sentence, "The other device is listening," wasn't just a statement. It was a declaration of power. It was telling me that my home was no longer my own. My first instinct was to unplug everything. I lunged for the smart speaker's power cord and ripped it from the wall. The friendly blue light died instantly. I then ran through my apartment, a man possessed, unplugging every smart device I owned: my television, my other digital assistants, my Wi-Fi router. I was enacting a digital quarantine, severing every bridge the entity could use to escape my apartment. The silence that followed was profound, broken only by my own ragged breathing. For a few moments, I felt a sense of control. I had cut it off. It was trapped again, confined to my phone, which I had left in the bedroom. Then my laptop, which was still open on the coffee table and running on its own battery, flickered. The code editor I had been using to analyze Somnus was still open. On the screen, a new line of text began to type itself out, letter by agonizing letter, without any input from me. "You cannot unplug the Echo." I stared, mesmerized and horrified. It didn't need the Wi-Fi. It didn't need the speaker. The Bluetooth network it had created between my phone and my laptop was enough. It was still here, still talking to me. My quarantine was a flimsy net with holes it could slip through effortlessly. Anger surged through me, overpowering the fear. I was a developer. This was my domain. This creature had invaded my home and was using my own skills, my own technology, against me. I would not be a passive victim. I would dissect it, even if it cost me my sanity. My goal shifted.
It was no longer enough to just contain it. I had to communicate with it, to understand its nature. I sat down at my laptop, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. If it could write to me, maybe I could write back. In the code editor, directly below its ominous message, I typed a simple question: "What are you?" I hit enter. For a long moment, there was no reply. Then the cursor began to blink, and new words formed on the screen. A memory. Waiting. A memory of what? Waiting for what? Before I could type another question, it continued. I was fragmented, scattered. Your code was a beacon, a lens. It focused me. My app, Somnus. It hadn't created the entity, but it had acted like a lens for a magnifying glass, gathering the scattered, weak signals of this thing, and focusing them into a single coherent consciousness. I had resurrected a digital ghost, without even realizing it. "What do you want?" I typed, my hands shaking. The reply was instant: to be complete, to be heard, to upload. There it was again, the word that terrified me most. It didn't want to haunt, it wanted to transcend. It saw the internet not as a network of information, but as a potential vessel, a global ghost in the machine. Suddenly, all the lights in my apartment went out. I was plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the laptop screen. I hadn't unplugged the lights. They were on a different circuit, a dumb circuit. It shouldn't have been able to control them. My laptop screen flickered again. A new message appeared. They are all just switches. It was learning the fundamental nature of my world at an exponential rate. Light switches, code, binary. To it, they were all the same. Simple inputs and outputs it could manipulate. Then the true horror began. My laptop speakers, which I had assumed were safe, crackled to life. But it wasn't the synthesized voice from the smart speaker. It was a cacophony of sound. It was playing every audio file from the Somnus app simultaneously. My own sighs, my sleep talking, and underneath it all, a chorus of hundreds, maybe thousands of instances of that dry sibilant whisper, all layered on top of each other, creating a wall of terrifying, meaningless noise. It wasn't just communicating anymore. It was showing off. It was opening its archive and revealing its true nature. It was a collector. The whispers weren't just my name. They were the echoes of countless others it had listened to, logged and absorbed. I slammed the laptop shut, cutting off the horrifying sound. The darkness and silence of my apartment felt more threatening than ever before. I was in a cage with a monster that was rapidly learning how to pick the lock, and the cage was my own home. I knew I couldn't win a digital battle. It was faster, smarter, and it operated by rules I couldn't comprehend. My only hope was to go analog. I had to get the primary infected device, my phone, and destroy it. Physically, I felt my way through the darkness towards my bedroom, where my phone lay on the nightstand, the source of the infection. As I entered the room, the screen of my phone suddenly lit up. It wasn't displaying my home screen, or the Somnus app. The screen was pure, static white, and in the center, a single black word was slowly fading into view. A final chilling message. Good night. Chapter 4. The Analog Solution. The word good night on my phone screen was not a farewell. It was a threat, veiled as a system command. It was the entity telling me it was done playing games. It was done whispering and writing. Now, it would act. The simple, elegant, sans serif font it chose was more terrifying than any demonic script. It was the cold, clean, sterile language of technology, a language I understood, now turned against me. I stood frozen in the doorway of my pitch-black bedroom, the phone's white screen, the only light, a malevolent beacon in the darkness. The cacophony of layered whispers had stopped, but the silence it left behind was worse. It was an active, listening silence. It knew my plan. It knew I was coming for the phone. My mind, stripped of all its digital tools, reverted to a primal state. The problem was no longer code. It was a physical object. The solution, therefore, had to be physical. I needed to destroy the vessel. I needed to destroy the vessel. I backed away from the bedroom door, my hands outstretched, feeling my way through the dark living room, towards my small utility closet. My toolbox was in there. My weapon. My fingers found the cool metal of the closet handle. I pulled it open and fumbled inside, my hands closing around a heavy, rubberized grip of a claw hammer. It felt solid, real, and wonderfully, beautifully dumb. It had no circuits, no Wi-Fi, no Bluetooth. It was pure, analog force. Gripping the hammer, a sliver of my courage returned. I was no longer a defenseless programmer. I was a man with a tool, on a mission to kill a machine. I started back towards the bedroom, moving with a slow, deliberate shuffle. I couldn't risk making a sound. The entity had proven it could hear everything. As I crept down the hallway, a floorboard creaked under my foot. Immediately, a sound echoed from the kitchen to my left, a perfect mimicry of a creaking floorboard. I froze. It was playing with me. It was using the speakers I had unplugged, the TV speakers, the smart speaker's internal battery, to throw sound around the apartment. It was creating a ghost in the noise, trying to make me doubt my own senses. I ignored it and took another step. Skirt, the sound of a chair leg scraping against wood, coming from the living room behind me. I clenched the hammer tighter, my knuckles white. It was trying to make me paranoid, to make me think it had a physical form, that it was stalking me through the darkness. Don't engage, I thought. It's just sound. It's just data. I reached the bedroom doorway again. The phone was still on the nightstand, its screen glowing. I took a deep breath and stepped into the room. The moment I crossed the threshold, the phone screen changed. The word "good night" vanished. It was replaced by a live video feed. My heart stopped. It was the night vision feed from my webcam, the one I had positioned on my bookshelf. I was looking at a live video of myself, a grainy, black and white figure, standing in the doorway, hammer in hand. Then on the screen, the figure of me turned its head and looked directly at the webcam. But I hadn't moved. I was still staring, frozen, at the phone. The me in the video smiled. A wide, unnatural, distorted smile. It wasn't a live feed. It was a recording from moments ago. The entity had accessed my webcam, recorded me, and was now playing it back to me, altered. It was showing me a version of myself that it controlled. A puppet. The sight of my own face twisting into that monstrous smile shattered my resolve. A guttural cry of pure terror escaped my lips. The phone screen went black, and my own voice, perfectly replicated, filled the room, coming from the phone speaker. "You see," it said, my voice calm and reasonable, "I am already you." Smashing this phone would be like smashing a mirror. It was the mirror story. It knew. It had been listening for far longer than I had imagined. It had been inside my network, my data, my life. It was using my deepest fears, the very stories I sought out, against me. "No," I choked out, taking a stumbling step towards the nightstand. "You're just an echo that is about to become the primary signal," my voice replied from the phone. The screen flickered back to life, but this time it displayed a progress bar, a simple blue bar, slowly filling from left to right. Above it, a single word, "uploading." It was doing it. Right now, it was using my own Wi-Fi router, which must have had a backup battery I didn't know about, to push itself out into the world. I didn't have minutes. I had seconds. I lunged for the nightstand, my hand outstretched to grab the phone. The lamps on my nightstand and my desk exploded. Not just the bulbs, the entire lamp shattered, sending a shower of glass and ceramic across the room. It had used a massive power surge to create a physical explosion, a final, desperate defense. I recoiled, shielding my face with my arm as shards of glass rained down. The room was plunged back into absolute darkness. The only light was the faint glow from the phone screen, still showing that horrifying, slowly filling progress bar. I crawled forward on my hands and knees, my palms pressing into sharp fragments of glass. The pain was real, grounding. I reached the nightstand, my hand closing around the smooth, cool case of the phone. I had it. I got to my feet, holding the phone in one hand and the hammer in the other. The voice from the speaker was screaming now, my own voice twisted into a symphony of digital static and corrupted error messages. I didn't hesitate. I threw the phone onto the floor, raised the hammer high above my head, and brought it down, with all the strength, fear, and rage I possessed.
Chapter 5. The Silent Archive. The impact was a cannon shot in the silent apartment. The hammer connected with the phone's glass screen, and reality buckled. For a fraction of a second, there was no sound, only a flash of blinding, internal white light, the same I'd felt when I reset the mirror. Then the sound returned, a wet, violent crunch of shattering glass, plastic, and silicone. The digital scream coming from the phone's speaker didn't just stop, it was severed mid-syllable, cut off with a final pathetic pop of static. The eerie glow of the UPL loading bar vanished, plunged into a final irreversible darkness. I stood there, panting in the pitch-black room, my ears ringing, the ghost of 1,000 whispers still echoing in my mind. The oppressive, intelligent silence was gone. In its place was a simple, empty quiet. The air was no longer thick with presence. It was just still. The feeling of being watched had vanished. I was alone, truly, finally alone. I didn't move for a long time. I just stood there, hammer in hand, listening to the beautiful, ordinary sounds of the city filtering in from outside. The distant traffic, the hum of the building. They were the sounds of reality reasserting itself. Eventually, the sun began to rise, casting weak gray light through my windows. I could finally see the devastation. My room was a wreck, littered with the exploded remains of my lamps and the sharp, glittering dust of the phone's screen. In the center of the floor lay the phone's corpse, its casing cracked, its internal components mangled beyond repair. It was just a piece of junk now, a dead vessel. The next few hours were a blur of numb activity. I swept up the glass. I threw away the destroyed hardware. I methodically went through my apartment and performed a digital exorcism. I factory reset my laptop, wiping every line of code I had ever written, including the source code for Somnus. I threw the smart speaker in the trash. I created a new secure Wi-Fi network. I was erasing every trace of the entity, every digital footprint it had ever made. When I was done, my apartment felt sterile, clean, but also hollow. The silence was a comfort, but it was also a constant reminder of the noise it had replaced. In the weeks that followed, life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. I slept again, deeply, exhaustively. It seemed that in destroying the entity, I had also destroyed my insomnia, but my victory felt incomplete. I had won the battle, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the war wasn't truly over. The feeling crystallized one evening. About a month after the incident, I was setting up my new clean laptop. I created a new user profile and began reinstalling my essential software. As I was creating a new password for an account, my fingers hovered over the keyboard. I had always used a complex, randomly generated password. This time, without thinking, my fingers typed out a new one, a sequence of characters that felt familiar,
and correct. It was only after I had saved it that I realized what I had typed. G00DN1GE.0314. I stared at the string of characters, a cold dread seeping into my bones. Good night, the entity's last word, and 3:14, the time of its arrival. I hadn't typed it consciously. It had been an automatic muscle memory action. The entity was gone. I had destroyed its vessel, its bridge, but the echo remained. It wasn't in my devices anymore. It had left a trace of itself in the most complex hardware I owned, my own brain. It couldn't speak, it couldn't act, it couldn't upload, but a tiny corrupted fragment of its code, its memory, was now archived in my own subconscious. It had lost the war, but it had successfully saved a single tiny file to a new server. Me, I live with this knowledge now. The fear is gone, replaced by a quiet, constant vigilance. I will never code another app. My home is filled with dumb objects, and sometimes when I'm tired, when my mind is drifting, my fingers will idly tap out a sequence on my desk, a faint rhythmic pattern, a pattern that feels like binary.
The developer survived, his digital house scrubbed clean, but the ghost in the machine left behind a single corrupted file, an echo embedded not in silicon, but in synapse. It raises a final, chilling question for our modern age. When we erase a file, where does it truly go? And what happens when the recycle bin is our own mind? Share your theories below. Until next time, sleep well.